Hello and welcome to week 3 of distance learning. This is Mr. Prather with his mojo hat on with this week's math lesson. For the last couple of weeks we've been talking about volume, and we have discovered that volume is the number of cubic units or cubes it takes to fill up a three-dimensional shape. And the three-dimensional shape that we have been focusing on is a rectangular prism or box. And we talked about the fact that a rectangular prism is three-dimensional because it has length, width, and height. We have also discovered that with the volume, to determine the volume of a rectangular prism, all you need to do is multiply the length times the width times the height, and the answer is in cubic units. For a warm-up, I want us to practice that formula. So what I need for you to do is at home, I want you to determine the volume of this rectangular prism. Keep in mind that the formula is length times width times height. Pause the video, take as long as you need, and when you're done, join me back here and we will continue today's lesson. Have fun. Welcome back. Let's take some time to discuss how to determine the volume for this rectangular prism. First of all, you notice that this rectangular prism has a length of 3 units, or 3 cubic units. So the length is 3 cubes. This rectangular prism has a width of 2 units or 2 cubes. And this rectangular prism has a height of 3 units or 3 cubes. So we can multiply the length times the width times the height. And as we discussed, it doesn't matter what order you multiply those factors in. I'm going to multiply 3 times 2 first, and that gives me 6. And then multiply that product times 3, and I get 18 cubic units. Or I could also write it as 18 units cubed with a little 3. Okay? So that's how we determine the volume for this rectangular prism. Right now, we need to take some time to talk about what the objective is for today's lesson. And I'm going to show you the objective for today. And I'll put this down here. Put that up here. Okay, the objective for today's lesson is students will determine the volume of irregular figures made up of 2 or more rectangular prisms. Right now I need to talk to you about what the word irregular means, irregular figures. This figure that we use to do our warm-up is a regular figure because it is simply one rectangular prism. An irregular figure is where you have 2 or more rectangulars put together to make a figure. Let me show you what I mean. Here's an example of an irregular figure, because we have more than one rectangular prism going together to make one figure. So our objective is to determine how to figure out the volume when you have an irregular figure. What you will do is you will break the irregular figure down into 2 or more rectangular prisms. Now, when you look at this figure, you can see that there are 2 rectangular prisms put together. So what we will do is we will separate the 2 rectangular prisms and analyze them each individually and come up with their volume. And then we will put the two volumes together. Let me show you how we do that. So I want us to take a look at this rectangular prism first. So I am going to get rid of this one for right now. And we will focus on that one a little bit later. But I want us to look at this one. And I'm going to move it up so we can see it. And I want us to refer to this rectangular prism as being prism 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to determine the length, the width, and the height of prism 1 so that we can determine the volume. So first of all, we see that the length is 2 cubes. Then we're going to take a look at the width, and we see that the width is also 2 cubes. Then we're going to look at the height. We're going to look at how tall this rectangular prism is, and we see that it too is 2 cubes. So we have an interesting situation here where the length, the width, and the height are all 2 cubes. So all we have to do now is multiply the length times the width times the height, which are all 2's. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 2 first, get that product, and then multiply by the other 2, and look at that. I get 8 cubic units as the volume, and another way I could write that is 8 units with an exponent of 3, which can be read as 8 units cubed. So that takes care of prism 1. Now we're going to take a look at the other prism. And I'm going to put that other prism right here. And you can see that this prism has a length of 2 cubes, a width of 2 cubes, and it actually has a height of 4 cubes. But if we continue the pattern, we could fill in what's missing. Yeah, let me turn that around the right way. We could fill in what's missing right here and really get a good view of the length, the width, and the height. And we're going to call this one prism 2. And just like we did for prism 1, we're going to label the length. And we see that the length is 2 cubes. We're going to label the width, which is also 2 cubes. And then we're going to take a look at the height, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 cubes. Then we're going to use our formula, length times width times height. So we're going to multiply 2 times 2 times 4. I'm going to multiply the 2 and the 4 first. I get 8. Then I'm going to multiply by this 2. And we know that 2 times 8 is 16. So that means that this rectangular prism has a volume of 16 cubic units. Or we could write it 16 units cubed with an exponent of 3. Okay, so that's rectangular prism 2. Then what we will do is we're going to put those together. And let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to remove this and just put that aside. Then I'm going to go ahead and put rectangular prism 1 back up. And I'm going to put rectangular prism 2 back up. Let's make sure they stay in place. And what we're going to do is, whoops, I'm going to put a little piece of tape up here to make sure it stays. Okay, so we found out that prism 1 has a volume of 8 cubic units, and we discovered that prism 2 has a volume of 16 cubic units. So our task was to determine the volume of the entire irregular figure. So all we have to do is add 16 plus 8. 6 plus 8 gives us 14, carry the 1. So all together, the volume of this entire irregular figure would be 24 cubic units. Or again, we could write it as 24 units cubed. And there you have it. We have learned how you can determine the volume of an irregular figure by breaking it down into 2 or more rectangular prisms, analyze the separate rectangular prisms to determine their volumes, and then add the volumes together. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and you will have an opportunity to do some practice with this on assignment number 2. Bye for now.